Thanks for joining us, everyone. My name is Sarah Russell. I'm the Special Assistant to End Homelessness for the City of Burlington. Thanks for coming today. I want to start today by referring to the motel exits that we saw beginning in the last week or so. We received data from the state indicating that between June 23rd and July 1st, we would see approximately 100 households in Chittenden County exiting the motel program. Exiting the motel program. Included in those 100 households were 35 families with children, with 61 children, 40 people who had medical vulnerabilities, in addition to others. We have, of course, as you know, have seen an increase in camping within the city this summer, and we have also seen the contracting of the General Assistance Emergency Housing Program, which has caused increase in sheltered homelessness over the last 3 years. On July 1st, we saw the expiration of the governor's executive order that included families with kids, as I mentioned, and people with medical vulnerabilities. They had reached their 80 days under the executive order and were to start exiting the program on July 1st. To further augment the city's response to unsheltered homelessness, we are piloting some safe overnight parking. Sorry, is this working for you or no? Do you want me to keep going? Is this okay? I can barely hear myself. Yeah. Do we want to move inside? Would that be easier? Sorry. I feel like it's so loud.
Yep.
Okay. Thanks for joining here today. I want to introduce myself. I'm Sarah Russell, the Special Assistant to End Homelessness for the City of Burlington. We're here today to talk about the exits from the General Assistance Emergency Housing Program and how those exits are impacting the city and how the city is decided to respond. As many of you know, the governor's executive order allowing households in the motel system to remain until June 30th expired. So we anticipate that we'll begin to see large numbers of folks leaving those motel programs starting yesterday, July 1st. In Chittenden County, we anticipate that there will be approximately 100 households that have exited the program between June 23rd and July 1st. Included in those 100 households are 35 families with 61 children and about 40 folks who have significant medical vulnerabilities. Obviously, over the last few years, we've seen an increase in unsheltered homelessness across the city, due in large part to challenging housing market, lack of affordable housing, lack of shelter capacity, and the contracting of the General Assistance Emergency Housing Program, or the Motel program. As I mentioned, the expiration of the executive order meant that about 100 households were exiting the program. And to further augment our city's response, we have decided to pilot a safe overnight parking program for folks at the Perkins Pier parking lot. We'll provide parking for up to 12 vehicles between the hours of 6 p.m. and 8 a.m. beginning on July 4th and extending during the temporary pilot period until August 15th. Parking services will be responsible for enforcing the permits for folks within that lot, just as they normally do. And the Burlington Police Department will be conducting additional patrols during the length of the temporary pilot period. During this period, until August 15th, we will continue to assess for success and challenges in mitigating this public health and safety concern. We'll also assess if the Perkins Pier is a viable option for this type of program. We've been talking about safe parking in the city for years now, and we'll consider locations as they come up along with other measures of success for the program. We all know camping and sleeping unsheltered, whether that is in a vehicle, on the ground, a park bench, or a tent, is not acceptable. It is not humane or dignified. The city is doing our best under extremely limited circumstances and resources to respond to the crisis of homelessness in Burlington. We continue to advocate locally and statewide for a coordinated transition from the Motel program that aligns with increased capacity of community-based shelters and services. That's what I got.
So obviously this was put out. Has this been a idea that, say, in weeks or months you guys have kind of been spurring in case something like this were to happen, or is it something that you guys have come up with the past week, or how did we get to this point with establishing purpose periods overnight parking?
Safe parking has been a model that, as long as I've been at the city, in 3 years, has come up from time to time. We have considered other models of safe parking in other states. Our Parks and Rec department was curious about that at the time. I think that it's something that we weren't sure how widely would be utilized. In lieu of us not being able to respond in a different way, as we did in the fall with the campsites at North Beach, we opted to, have some kind of a response to try. So this is something that came about rapidly, within the last week or so, once it became apparent that the governor was not going to extend the executive order.
What was the approval process for this?
The approval process for this, we have been working very closely with Parks and Rec, who owns and manages the Perkins Pier area, in addition to Department of Public Works that oversees the enforcement of parking on site.
Was there any community input on this?
Due to the limited time frame we had to act on this, we weren't able to engage in a public process like we would have liked to. Thus, the pilot, period, the temporary nature of this. So this is something to try. It's a very small number of vehicles over a very short period of time, which we hope will allow us to see sort of what the benefits are and if there are challenges that need to be worked out. I also want to note that part of the policy that's stated really clearly and what we've developed is that the program is subject to change or end at any time, depending on if challenges come up that can't be mitigated.
Do you see this pilot expanding a lot of purpose potential from that over across from the police station? If that block could also be turned into something similar to this?
I think we're considering multiple locations at this point. We were not able. That was a location that was that was prioritized for consideration. We're not able to implement something there right now due to it being used as a staging location for the renovations at the police department. So an outcome could be that that's a more suitable location, or that another location might be more suitable.
How does this work? I know you filled this form, but what is that form? Is this only for people living in their car? Can someone put their tent up?
No.
What's the process here?
No, it's still a park. It's a city-managed park, and per city ordinance, there is no camping allowed in city parks. So tents have been in the past and will continue to be removed from that location. When someone fills out or would have to, contact the city, it would go through a brief sort of screening questionnaire, we would go through and complete the sections on that form and determine that the household was in fact lacking a permanent fixed residence, and met the HUD definition of homeless, and then we would request their license, proof of registration, and valid driver's license, and register their license plate for a permit.
So you're screening people who are homeless. This isn't for someone in their van traveling.
No.
You have final. The city has final say.
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, it's common in a lot of places to see people living in their cars, for instance, in the back of a Walmart parking lot or something like that over the years. I mean, I guess, how did you gauge that there's a demand for this service here? Are you seeing these sorts of people living in their cars on private lots and places? Is that not an option for them?
That is a great question. So we rely on our community partners to provide data around both the number of folks who are unsheltered and a subsect of that of people who are sleeping in cars. And our most current recent data that we have from the month of June indicated that there were 17 households that were self-identifying as sleeping in vehicles within Chittenden County, primarily focused in the city.
Yeah, and as for those who don't have cars, we do have this tent for some personal belongings. You brought up North Beach Campground a year ago. You know, the city is looking at that or another location as an option again for those folks.
Unfortunately, we're not at this time because of the timing of the season. So North Beach Campground is fully booked for the most part for the season, so we're not able to fall back on another resource like that at this time.
Can you explain how this works right now? I was parked there, my understanding is that we get a ticket or towed. So how does this work right now, and what is that change?
Yeah, I'm really glad you asked that, Ike. So right now, at the start of the season, Parking Services was informed by, which is out of DPW, was informed by Burlington Parks and Recreation and Waterfront to only charge for parking at Perkins Pier between the hours of 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. So in other words, there is no fee to park at Perkins Pier between 8 p.m. and 8 a.m. So the permit, if you will, allows for us to waive the fee between 6 p.m. and 8 p.m., which is $3 per hour. So it's really waiving that fee for that period of time.
Why Perkins Pier?
Like I said, we assessed, different areas. There are actually, I know the city has a number of parking lots. Perkins Pier is currently one of our only parking lots that allows for, per ordinance, overnight parking. So our options were somewhat limited when we looked to the ordinance.
Was there any discussion, say, with concerts, CBOEO, or any of those kinds of providers when it came to this situation?
We are in constant communication with our partners and working with their respective outreach teams to understand, kind of what the challenges are. Again, that data point that we rely on as well. So we're in constant communication with our partners.
And could you talk a little bit about, maybe more detail about, say, how enforcement works with the times? You're talking to places like Spot on the Dock, for example. They're overfilled a lot when their main lot fills. Same with Janty on the Shore, and people there at 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, up to 9, 10 o'clock when the sun goes down. And there is a concern that people, who have parking passes starts at 6, maybe showing up at 3, 4 o'clock, taking parking away from their potential customers or staying later.
In the same way that other folks that we would address unpermitted parking, or if somebody didn't pay the parking fee, we would address folks who were presenting before 6 p.m. So enforcement would work in the same way. It's a very large lot, and we have, as you saw, I'm sure, from the policy, have cornered off a smaller section where folks need to park within. And I think it's also important to note that we're only talking about up to 12 vehicles. So there's not a huge, we're not talking mass numbers of vehicles.
Well, how many police? Is there going to be a cutoff line, and then they'll be ticketed if they park outside the designated area?
Of course, in the same way that we would enforce parking across the city.
How did you get to that 12 vehicles?
I think thinking about what is reasonable to manage, and also thinking about, again, to the data piece, we like to make decisions based on data, starting with a number that felt like it could be sort of easily managed and responded to for a temporary period of assessment made sense.
Has the city received complaints about people living in their cars in residential neighborhoods or other areas of the city?
We do occasionally receive complaints from folks who are street parking. Per ordinance, I believe if someone is parked in a spot, they need to move their car. I think it's like 30 feet every 3 days or something like that in order for the ordinance to kick in. We do hear, I wouldn't say complaints, but observations of folks sleeping in their car. Typically, if someone's sleeping in their car and there's not a great deal of activity outside, and sleeping in their car. So we don't hear a large number of complaints, just more observation.
Expecting this goes on a schedule that was stop that has some, it's mentioned there. What resources, if any, will this be bringing in, and how much is this going to cost for this first pilot parking program?
I don't know what you mean by resources. Can you?
There's no bathrooms, there's no water.
Okay. We are installing an ADA porta potty on site. There are bathrooms on site in the building at Perkins Pier, but they I think close beginning at 8 p.m. until 8 a.m. the next morning. So we're bringing in a temporary ADA porta potty. We have funding set aside within the city's budget to provide increased access to public restrooms, as we're doing in other portions of the city. So it's not an unbudgeted cost. In terms of the cost of the program, I think I would really point to the potentially lost revenue of $3 an hour for 2 hours.
Business I talked to said, there wasn't really any communication. I mean, you pointed to, obviously, you had to work quick on this. But the lack of communication and doing this on July 4th, when we're already seeing numbers down, what's your reaction to that?
Numbers down.
Of sales.
I mean, I think, as I said, I'm going to go back to my earlier point that we had to respond really quickly. It became apparent to us last week that despite our efforts, the city also issued a letter of advocacy to the governor to halt the exits from this motel program. I want to, reinforce that our request was not to expand the program, but was to lift the 80-day cap and to keep folks where they are, which have very little budgetary implications. So that our advocacy was did not impact, or maybe, I don't know, but the governor did not change course on those exits. So we had a really limited time, to get this going. I think that part of the assessment process to determine success or challenge will also include hearing from our partners, both in the business community and community members, as well as service providers and folks who are accessing this as a resource in the community, to understand how the success and challenges of the project.
But there was no communication with the business community before this announcement.
The city had to work in an expedited manner to respond to the crisis.
So that no.
There wasn't specific outreach. There wasn't specific outreach to the business community. Are there other questions?
I have no. So I understand that.
Who are you?
I'm Jeff.
Oh, well, you emailed me.
I did.
Yeah. Well, I didn't get your email until like 5:30 last night. So yeah. Yeah.
So the average person parking probably doesn't live in their car, right? So that's one thing that's different about people that are part of this program and people that park in that parking lot regularly, right? So my question is, at 8 a.m. in your rules, if they're not moved, they get towed, right?
They would be ticketed in the same way that anyone who was not parking or was not paying for parking in the lot. We can't tow a car with people inside the car.
Because you said that they'll be towed in your press release at 8 a.m. if they have moved. That's part of the rules, right? Mm-hmm. So 8 a.m., how are they being towed?
If people are not being compliant with the rules in place, they're in violation of the agreement, and then their permit would be completely revoked anyway. If folks violate ordinances within the city and are in places that they're not supposed to be, then the city is within its rights to issue a trespass notice and have that enforced by the police department.
Of course, we've seen similar expirations before, and
Yeah.
commented on those in the past, but do you have anything you would want to say to Governor Scott in this moment?
Not more than I've said. I mean, I think that when there are when there's a lack of coordination around policy at the state level, it forces municipalities and social service providers to respond in ways that that are crisis oriented. And I think one of the main things that we've been advocating for, and something I've really been pushing, is around these 80-day caps. I understand the total number of room caps is not sufficient. However, we don't also have sufficient shelter capacity within our communities. The cycle of the 80-day exits wreaks havoc in our communities, and as municipalities and again as service providers, we're forced to be in this crisis response mode instead of being able to have systems level and policy reform.
I guess I'm just confused on what this is going to look like. I just think back to Sarah's lane on how no one wanted to watch that. And the city was really trying to have someone monitor that area. So is there going to be a paid city official monitoring this? We hear about police saying they need more people. Are there going to be more police during a holiday weekend specifically there sitting watching?
I mean, I'm just going to stop because I think what we're talking about is waiving $3 for 2 hours from 6 p.m. to 8 a.m. And I've already mentioned that we're going to have parking services on site who are going to monitor the lot in the same way they do other public parking across the city, and that BPD has committed to providing increased controls. So beyond that, I think that we'll use this temporary period to understand what might be more effective. So thank you. Well, people won't be there 24/7, so folks will only be there.
While there's not going to be one person set to oversee the area.
There's not right now. Thanks.